Hi, it's Colleen Schmidt from Divination Counseling Service to continue our eclipse saga. The full moon of March 3rd, 2026 is a lunar eclipse. It will continue our eclipse saga. However, it is an eclipse chart, which means it's probably already been in effect for about 12 weeks. And we'll have 12 more weeks to go. But with that said, there's probably not too much I'm going to say today that isn't a confirmation of what you've already been seeing or feeling going on around you. As always, the chart is set for Washington, D.C., but I don't want to spend a lot of my time talking about what's going on in Washington, though it's the easy example. What I would rather us do is look at this chart in terms of how does it affect us as individuals. So the first thing I want to do, and as you can see, there's a pizza pie chart up. And the pizza pie chart has the sun right off the ascendant, about a degree and a half, maybe a little more, and the moon right off the descendant, the same amount. So what we're looking at is whatever is happening in Washington is going public. And it's not so much that it falls in the Aries point, it's just that anytime something comes off the ascendant, it's being presented to the greater world at large. So in this case, whatever is going on in Washington is going to be noticeable no matter who you are or where you live in the world. It's almost like you can't escape it. Now, that is not the only phenomenon on this chart. There's a couple things. The next thing I want to look at is this Mars. Okay, so Mars has just ingressed. It's now in a new energy and it'll stay there, I guess, for about 2 years. So you're not looking at something that's going to change overnight. It takes longer for the moon to, for the moon takes a month, okay? Mars takes a little longer to get through every sign. So Mars is now beginning its journey through the sign of Pisces. What this means, since Mars is our actions, we could be more sympathetic. We can be more apathetic. We could be more just in general. We could just be a little bit more sensitive to what's going on around us. So with that said, it's not a strong energy because it's really ruled by Mars. By Aries, or it rules Aries is what I should say, the sign of Aries. So here, Mars is a bit weakened. However, the thing to be concerned about with this Mars, and we are more sensitive, but we also have to be worried about underhanded things because that Mars is in the 12th house. It also could be tempers that are flaring behind the scenes, but it could also be disillusions, maybe self-deceptions or self-delusions that are going on in our life that we have to be careful of. Okay? We have to be really careful because Mars working in the 12th could always be an underhanded energy. Who'd be surprised with this government in Washington, D.C., but I digress. So I wanted to just kind of look at that. The other thing we're going to be looking at, it's not on here, but we will be looking at it in depth when we get to the sun-moon axis, is the fact that Pallas is also at 12 degrees of Pisces. So it sits right there on that sun. It's actually a few degrees less. I think it's more in the 12, 20 range, or maybe even earlier than that. So a little bit closer to the ascendant. But look out, because I look at Pallas, I know it's strategy, but I also know that it's partisan and it's politics and it's partisan politics, because that's how the parties work. They strategize and they tell you everything they think you want to hear. So be aware of that. Be aware that that's happening. And also there's stuff going on behind the scenes with that Mars. So that's about all that I really want to cover as far as the United States is concerned. I don't really want to spend a lot of time here. It is a great place to begin to show um, something that's really obvious when you want to figure out what does a planet mean. So as I move now to the 90, I'm sorry, we're going to do a 360 on here, okay? And with this 360, what I want to do is I want to do just a few astrology things, okay? Like, for example, when we look at the Aries point, we only have two factors, okay? And basically what we're getting here is this is people who gather together for common interest. Now, the node itself is not far off. So the node is a factor. So if I were to go put these together, this is the people coming together for common interest. And then because our connections are the node, these associations will seek each other out. Okay. Now, it could be connections with like-minded people, but it could also be associations such as family, groups of people. So there's something going on there. And here again, this is mostly for Washington. Look how everything is kind of set up when I went for these, the midheaven, which is very clearly just Washington, to that Cupido. That's what I get. So a couple other things I wanted to look at here. That midheaven also makes an aspect to that Mercury, okay? Now, this is talking about how people are going to be observing things, and it's going to be about our ideals. And there's this can even relate to judgments about particular people. But look at this. There's pressure to change. It could be whatever we find out, whatever that judgment or opinion is, it is going to put pressure on change. Okay, so now I'm looking at experiencing those changes. Okay, so that change is coming through Mercury. And again, this is where you concentrate. This is like where people are concentrating their thought on those changes and they're debating about those changes. And this is a negotiation. So there's some negotiations going on. When you get to that, you have to also include the fact that the midheaven of the United States is the factor. Remember, whatever is going on here is coming back out into the world. And again, not that I want to spend a lot of time on the United States, but I do think it's really important to note how important that midheaven is within this chart. Okay, so we are looking at in Washington the impact of great change through outside events. Okay, people's attitudes are changing. The way they think and view the outside world will change as a result of what is happening in this country. Okay, but it's a completed picture because it also hits Mercury. Whatever it is coming out in the news. It also leads to a Uranus Cupido, which is sudden connections, sudden events that will happen within an organization. In this case, it could be within the government. Okay, so something's going on here that we can see, and it is affecting families or organizations. All right. The other thing that this chart pulls out is was a Moon Jupiter effect I wanted to go through. And the Moon Jupiter is at the Aries point. Okay, so I that's why I really wanted to point it out. This is being happy. This is being contented. This is lucky changes that are happening. Somebody says, or it says in somewhere that a happy divorce, but I think that's when I got to what was happening over here. So you can tell I've done this a lot. But this is wonderful. This is truly, truly a good thing. Like whatever is happening is eventful, but I can see that we're happier. Okay. Now, when I go to the Aries point, other than that midheaven Cupido, I don't really see a lot. Okay. Poseidon's off a bit. We have, of course, Neptune, because that's hanging out with the Aries point for a long time now. So this is like our biggest events, okay? When I go and I change it to the sign of Aries, we pretty much get the same kind of picture, with the exception of the node. That is the one thing that does come out through this chart work. Okay, so with that said, we're looking at a time when we're going to be happy about the changes. I think this is all part of that other eclipse chart where we're also reinventing ourselves. We're also finding ways to work outside the box with that connection to Chiron. Here, the midheaven to Uranus is another factor where this is actually excitement. Okay, so we are excited about whatever's going on. Okay, in some ways it can also bring tension, but there's excitement, there's tension. So that's the Uranus factor. Uranus is getting ready to change signs. But look at this. There's also that equals Uranus, which is it's really about thoughts, being powerful thoughts, and how exerted, it's like, oh, wow, we come up with something, bam, we're on it. Okay. So it's like really, really quick with that Uranus energy. And we're also receiving very surprising news. And some people could be very upset through their surprising news. So it's very much an exciting chart, though it doesn't initially show within the Aries point itself. It's rather quiet. That means that whatever's going on in the world right now is probably majority happening here, unfortunately. So that's a little disconcerting. So when I go to the sun and the moon, I'm now looking again for those dots. And the very first, and probably the one that's most significant that shows up, is Zeus. So we know the sun and the moon as our connections. It's like a married couple or a really strong friendship. It can be acquaintances, but it's the people that we really connect with hourly and daily. And we're going to take Zeus out of it. We're going to minus it so that we get an idea of what Zeus means there. And we get things that this is what a lot of people have been talking about recently, is the sudden urge to do things, to accomplish things. Maybe it's spring fever, but we will have an urge to move, to do things, to get things done, which is really great. Now, in the case of the United States chart, because it affects both the midheaven and the ascendant, here we're looking at how the rest, again, it's about the relationship that the United States has. Okay, so it's about the relationship to others, maybe even the relationship it has with the people, but it's also about people in general in the United States coming together for common directives. Okay, and it's really interesting because as we have the midheaven, the ascendant, and the coming together, the moon is also there. Okay, which means the moon and the sun, but the moon literally shows up there. And it's really about behavior, and it's especially behavior to the public or public relations, but it's also behavior to women. Okay, which is not surprising right now with the way things are going. So again, going back here, just kind of looking at what pops up with the sun, the moon, we have Zeus. Okay, so the other this was the other one, and you'll see this when we get to the midpoint. This Mercury, so which I just looked at. So we had the Vulcanus, the Pluto, which is the experiences of change and transformation that's happening through news about whatever's being put out in public. And this chart would be whatever DC is up to. But it's also more importantly about us developing our power and the power of the people. So it has a really good meaning there. And again, completed picture. If I take out Cupido, which has a dot, it's very great changes that take place that occur either about the family or within society. Okay. And it might be society's attitude about, but it also brings up the Pluto Mercury. So, see, once you start getting into these, then you start finding more and more and more. It's like you go in deeper and deeper and deeper. And so here we have the Pluto and the Mercury, and it's basically we're all going to be a little bit smarter, okay? So it goes from thinking to understanding, from external and internal motion. So it's like we're beginning to really change. That reiterates what I spoke about in the last video about reinventing ourselves. Okay. Well, I think the United States is also in that because of the midheaven. So when you're redeveloping, okay, the change, that development, and you take out it's, you're really coming up with what I want to say is coordinated thought. Okay. So you can see how these things intermingle, how all of it should make sense, actually, all of it should make perfect sense. If I switched over to looking at the moon instead of the sun, I'm not going to get any changes. I still have Zeus because we are looking at a 360 dial. So with that said, the other thing we should look at is this is what I was talking about in the chart, especially this node to the ascendant and also the south node to the moon. Now, this can also mean that our connections can be oppressive, particularly the old way of doing things is not working. If you go back to your 360 dial, you get that same impression. Some things are not working um, for with that south node. Okay, so you see the south node, and that's the sixth house. So it's sort of like, your day to day reality. It's something isn't working, but the new thing is still in the background. Okay, so that we're still building the new thing, which is the new connections, the new way it's real interesting. We've been oppressed by the old, but we're moving into the new, but the new is in the 12th house and has not yet revealed itself over the ascendant. We're working on it though. You can tell reinvention, the fact that we're changing how we think inside and out. So we, the people, are really, really changing. And that is a really important factor right there. At this point, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take this and look at solar fire. So bear with me because I'm still working. This is a newer computer. I still don't have it down. So I apologize for some of the stuff. So here we are with solar fire. And I just wanted to point out one thing on the pizza pie chart. I said 1220, it was actually 1219. But here you can see the sun is conjuncting Pallas right there. Okay. I also feel like pictures will be involved because that's right on top of the palace and the sun. So look out for some mean photography while we're at it. I just thought I'd throw that in. But those are the things I really wanted for you to see. The other thing that's pretty interesting is coming out of Washington is doo-doo. I'm sorry, ditto, which means, more of the same, I'm sorry, is sitting right on top of the IC. So it should be an interesting next couple of weeks. So I just wanted to go through that. Now I'm going to switch this over to the dial. And the first thing that we're going to talk about that I want to talk about is that 1253 point. Let's make sure I'm by the minute. There we are. Oops. And the first thing we're going to talk about is these midpoints. Okay, so we got midpoints there. Then if I took this 7253 and I either subtracted 2230, which would be easy because that would bring us to 5023, we would then have our second, there it is, axis, which is 20 degrees of fixed 23. So anybody that has anything at 20 degrees fixed, 23, or 5 degrees of cardinal, 23, 12 degrees, 53, or 27 degrees, 50. So you have 12 degrees, 53, that's mutable. And then your cardinal again for the 27, 53. So just to review, the cardinal signs are, so it's 523 and then 2753. And you want to get within a degree for really good interpretation. Those points would include Capricorn, Cancer, Libra, and Aries. If you have something down here at 2023 fixed, you're looking at Scorpio, Taurus, Aquarius, and Leo. If you're over here in the mutable land, you have the Pisces Virgo, which is the actual eclipse point, or it could be Gemini and Sagittarius would also be affected there. So all of those are going to be factors in this particular axis point. And anything that I say could be even affecting you in a personal way. So we're going to start off with those, the actual midpoints of the astrology right here. Okay. Now, with that said, we've got all kinds of midpoints. But we also want to include Pallas in some of these interpretations because Pallas is sitting with the sun. It's like it's Bud right next to it. Okay. Within a degree. So basically, what we're doing is we're looking at things that now are making midpoints, like Aries Cupido is actually in the other one. So is the Hades Venus and the Chronos Hygeia. These all are coming from that 5 degree, 5 degree 23. So in other words, they're in this arena. There's some of it right there you can see, and I'm not even there yet. So I have to get to 523, but you can see, there we go. Okay, so here's your Hades Venus. So basically, we're looking at stuff that's in this lineup as well. Okay, so I wanted to, bring that to your attention that they only show up with the arm that they're in. Okay, there's 2 arms to look at. So we're going to start with those first. And basically what we've got here is a couple of things. We've got strategic public institutional manifestation. That's the Aries point in the Cupido. Hey, it's right there. Okay. And it's really institutional developments will go public. A lot of things are going public. We already talked about that. The other thing that we're looking at is strategic exposure of corruption values. Okay, and that's the Hades Venus, where we have a degraded value systems will be revealed. And again, remember, this is everywhere in the world, no matter who you are. This is still going to be a Hades Venus midpoint because we are talking about the sun and the moon axis. Regulatory health authority. Well, that's the Chronos Hygeia right in there. Okay, and that's a high level health decisions and authority over health structures. Okay, and again, I don't need to use politics, but I think we only need to listen to the news to know that that's legitimately happening in the United States. But if the United States is doing this and putting it public, how is that affecting the rest of the world? Well, it does. We also have focused moral connection, and that's the Astrea to Vesta. Now, Vesta is our work, our goals. That's the keeping the fires going. But Astrea is something that's not easily fixed. It continues on. Astrea has a longevity thing, it's like not easily. So there's no easy solutions. And the interesting thing is the AI associates us with justice because justice does take a long time, doesn't it? So what it's telling us, though, that justice will become a central mission. I think that has already begun. So as we look at this eclipse, we see things like policy level correction. Okay, that's your Pallas with the sun and the moon. It's the result of an emotional culmination. Well, in politics, it would be the fact that we, the people, have been really standing up. There's your emotional culmination, and it will equal a policy level correction. That's what we're hoping. This particular eclipse is intellectual. We've already been through a lot of that. Regulatory, justice focused, health system aware, institutionally strategic. Okay? It's not so it's mostly a psychological thing, okay? So the eclipse is not merely emotional, but with Pallas conjunct the sun and moon, it carries strategic intelligence where justice themes within institutions will be activated. Healthcare systems or health systems will face regulatory pressure. A lot of people suing the Food and Drug Administration. So it's just, the way it is. And also just our health system in general is just getting all, especially with their latest vaccine schedule and things that they're telling us not to do anymore. And states are suing. There you go. Compromised value structures are exposed and corrective action becomes focused and deliberately. Okay, so that is true. Okay, so here's what's going on. All right. So basically, what we're dealing with internal corrections, strategic recalibrations, even within ourselves. Okay. So this is really important. All right. So it's talking about things. Now I'm going to go on, and this is going to actually go back to this list. Let me go back to. So what happened is now we're shifting to the axis, the other axis. Okay. And here we see things like Cupido and Astrea, it's right here. Justice within institutions, moral correction involving groups, alliances, and organizations. The Mars Hygeia form is action taken regarding the health systems, and there's an enforcement, an intervention, and repair that will be necessary. The black moon, Lilith, is with the ascendant here. Right here it is. It's an equatorial ascendant. And it tells us that the shadow material, stuff in the background, will become visible. This is like when Mars crosses over that ascendant. What was denied or repressed surfaces publicly. Now, with this, now we're going to move again. And as we move to Aries Cupido, we get things like institutional matters move into public visibility. We've already mentioned that with that sun right off the ascendant. And with Hades Venus, we have compromised values exposed. Financial relational or ethical decays will be revealed. Now, this can happen even in your own life where there could be relationship issues, there could be financial issues, where in general, things seem to be getting worse. It's going to show up in the asteroids. Regulatory authority, So with that Chronos Hygeia, we're looking at a regulatory authority over health matters and a high level standards imposed or revised. Astrea Vesta is focused dedication to justice. It doesn't come quickly with Astrea. The correction, however, will become a central priority. Okay, so I'm going to begin now looking at the asteroids that fall in those 4 areas, and they're done by grouping so that it helps you understand the asteroids better. So they're putting together ones that go together like ego and psychological correction. Okay, so we're taking the asteroids that relate to the ego and psychological correction. Roche is a narcissistic distortion. Something distorted because it's narcissistic. That's retrograde, which means it's already in effect and it may be something we're looking back on. Mine, retrograde, is the ego identity. Now, in astrology, it also means the face. Okay, if you're looking at somebody's mine, it's their face. But mine is an ego thing. The face is an ego thing. Stockholm is also retrograde, and it refers to unhealthy attachments. Patsy is our scapegoating. Icarus is our overreach. Okay, so we have distorted identity structures that need to be corrected. We have projection. What they're projecting is going to be exposed. What people are trying to project. Hubris meets consequence. Fate and consequence. That's our next area. And here we have the asteroid Destin, or Destiny. Pandora, which is retrograde, for surprises. We might be dealing with surprises that we already got, but now we're really looking at them. Why, you ask? Because of Melpomene and Aragon. Melpomene is things are getting worse. Okay? Just saying. And Aragon is the self-destruction. So it's an inevitable unfolding where the consequences are now ripening, and there can be, as a result, a moral reckoning. Truth and exposure is my next set. And here we're looking at Veratus, which is the truth. Okay, Veratus is truth. And then Pandora, which is surprise. Surprise! The truth is a surprise. Here, illusion has an opportunity to dissolve. We can dissolve illusions, and the truth then surfaces. With institutional scale adjustments being necessary, we're looking at the asteroids Apollonia, which is read a lot like Apollon. More than one, it's expansion, it's business. But Liliputina tells us it's a little too little and it's a little too late. Victoria. Okay, so here's what we got for a theme. Large systems will have to be refined. Downsizing or efficiency shifts. Victory through corrections. Compassionate and restructuring. That structuring is strategic with Pallas, okay? So the words compassion, which is compassion, which I already talked about. Hestia is that, like Vesta, it's the work, it's the goals, it's keeping the fires burning. Pallas is the strategy. It is a return to core values. It is correction guided by wisdom, if only. We can hope this is true. Measured, intelligent restructuring. So here what we're looking at is the eclipse, this axis, it reveals at its core strategic institutional corrections. It also reveals shadow material that is now going to surface, things that were in the shadows. Health system face pressure. Okay, that's going to, our health systems, I don't care where you are, who you are, but there's going to be pressure there. Ego distortions are exposed, and compromised value structures will be revealed as a result. Yet the tone of this energy is more deliberate and policy oriented rather than a big chaotic thing. So now what I want to do is I want to move into Aries. Okay, so for Aries, we're looking at these midpoints. Okay, a lot of repeat in there. It looks like a lot, but it's a lot of repeat. Juno is just outside, but we're gonna be talking about it anyway. But we lose it 3 minutes before we actually get to the exact point. And here you can see that, and I believe this would be the node is over on this side. So, and you can see the node. So basically we're going to be looking at this axis right here. That's what we're going to be spending the rest of our time on. And realize that the Aries point is the world stage, its headlines, and its public activation. Aries point equals Cupido midheaven. Okay, this is leadership restructuring within institutions. The Aries point also equals a Cupido Pluto. So there will be transformation of our alliances and a power realignment. This is what we'll be working on. Aries point also equals Sirius Admetus. You know, that also can be overall generally a good time for dieting because Admetus limits Sirius's food. Thought I'd throw that in. Supply chain restrictions. Get ready, guys, and resource bottlenecks because that's food blockages. Okay, so food blockages could be a diet on a literal sense, but it could also be we got a problem. Zeus Adamitus is another one in here, which is targeted enforcement happening under pressure. We actually talked about Zeus, but actually with Pluto as a pressure as well, pressure to transform. Well, here we have Zeus Adamitus, which tells us not only are we going to be pressured to transform, but there's going to be enforcement that happens under pressure. With Adamitas to the ascendant, there's going to be visible limitations or compression. We're going to see it. We're going to see it. There are other asteroids that will even explain how it's dealing with money, but we are dealing with it. It also deals with Volcanus Vesta, which is focused, concentrated power. We're going to be looking at that. The Uranus ascendant is why everything, and it's in here, it's in this cross, okay? So is the Pluto and Cupido. So they're in this one, then the other one shares the others. Here with the Uranus, we have sudden public disruptions and unexpected developments, okay? Aries point also is connected to Astraea. We got that right here at the top, and that's public justice and a legal accountability. So I'm going to start the asteroids here, and we'll finish up with these asteroids. Criminal exposure and legal reckoning. That's our first category. Gudjutsen is a criminal personality. Hack is retrograde, speaking about a digital breach that's probably already happened with that retrograde. Truth is retrograde, which means the facts will be contested. Shocking. Sphinx, not retrograde, thank God, does talk about hidden truth, though. It's a hidden truth. Price is the cost and the consequences of that. And Astraea, again, the AI likes to use for justice. The theme is investigation, forensic exposure, and legal consequences that become visible. Our next category is technology and media disruption. And here we're looking at Prometheus, which is like Uranus. So when you think about that technology stuff, okay? Berners-Lee is websites, media. It's out there, you know, those websites, the podcasts, all of that. Messenger is retrograde. So what have we been hearing? Memoria. What do we remember? So it's going to be digital exposure and a narrative revision. And that ultimately will bring in informational corrections. Okay? Economic and resource pressure is our next one. And here we're looking at coin, Demeter for food. Okay? Works like Ceres. We already saw that. The Demeter's retrograde. And the price. So yeah, I told you it was in there. Here we have currency and supply issues. We have a financial tightening, and we have an economical consequence as a result. Our next category is public psychological climate. Well, it starts with melancholia. We're a little depressed. And we're a little nostalgic. Nostalgia is retrograde. We have somnium, so we're all having trouble sleeping. And then Hara is also retrograde, so listen to your gut. That's what it's telling you. Here we have collective fatigue, disillusionment, and reassessment of the past. I think so. Next, we have alliance and leadership figures, and that is where we pick up Juno, which is partners one-on-one. We've been through that. Diana, think about dogging somebody, okay? But it's also that hunter-prey. Champion, we are all looking for the hero right now. Varda is the truth that lights up the room. It brings the light in. And Albertus Magnus is about big money. Now, when we get to this next grouping and they come together, Barrett, Champ, Rank, and Dudu, Barrett means listen to your, you don't want to be, how do I put this? You want to listen to your gut, Hara, so that you don't become too Pollyanna, too whatever, because that will lead to Champ, which is, being humiliated. Why? Because of Dudu by a narcissist or a narcissistic person. Watch out for that. It's really come to my attention how many people have narcissistic disorders. Just want to throw that in. So here we'll hear about things like treaty negotiations, visible advocates, named individuals will be highlighted, and as a result, intellectual leadership could shift. Here, to sum it up, is the Aries point shows into institutional corrections that become public. Leadership structure shifts. Alliances will transform and economic tightening becomes very visible. There can also be some legal accountability that'll surface. It's about digital exposure and the media revision amplifying the manifestation. Boy, is that true. Okay, just once again, I want to say digital exposure and media revision will amplify this manifestation. Just think about that. At this point, I want to thank you for watching this video, and I'd love to hear from you. With that said, as always, I wish you all only happy reading.